Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Larry Lease. On today's episode of Breakout Kings, we dive into the 2015 Clinton Correctional Facility prison escape. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Audible, for sponsoring this episode. If you're a fan of audiobooks, any kind of genre, from historical fiction, nonfiction, true crime, autobiographies, Audible is your home for endless entertainment. Head on over to audibletrial.com/Larry21 for a free audiobook of your choice and a free 30-day trial. And as always, you can find us on all social media platforms. Just search out True Crime Never Sleeps. And without further ado, let's dive right in. The 2015 Clinton Correctional Facility escape was a jailbreak that took place on June 6, 2015. When two inmates, Richard Matt and David Sweat, were discovered missing during a 5:17 a.m. bed check at the maximum security Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York. Matt was serving 25 years to life, and Sweat was serving life without parole, both for murder. The two prisoners had escaped by cutting a hole in their cell walls, gaining access to the utility areas behind and above their cells. Eventually, they cut a hole in a steam pipe and used the pipe to escape from prison into the city sewer. With tools obtained from two cooperating prison employees, nearly 3 weeks after the escape, Matt was found in Malone, New York, where he was shot and killed. 2 days after that, Sweat was shot and taken into custody. The manhunt investigation were said to have cost about $23 million. So who is Richard Matt? Now let's talk about it. Richard William Matt was born and raised in Tonawanda, New York, a suburb of Buffalo, and began receiving foster care along with his brother Robert early in life. Career criminal, Matt served recurrent prison terms in the 80s and 90s for various crimes including burglary, rape, theft, and assault. Having first escaped from a group home in his early teens, Matt had a history of escaping from correctional facilities. On December 3, 1997, Matt and an accomplice named Lee Bates kidnapped William Rickerson, Matt's former boss, from his home in North Tonawanda in an attempt to rob him. Matt demanded to know the location of a large sum of money he believed Rickerson possessed. He and Bates drove to Ohio and back for approximately 27 hours with Rickerson in the trunk of the car, periodically stopping to open the trunk to beat and torture their victim. Matt eventually killed Rickerson by breaking his neck before dismembering his body, throwing the parts in the Niagara River, and escaping to Mexico. On February 20th, 1998, while in the border city of Matamoros, Tamaulipas, apologies for butchering the name, Matt murdered the second man, Charles Arnold Peralt, an American engineer working in a local factory. Matt tried to rob Arnold and then stabbed him to death at a bar as he was using the restroom. Matt was soon arrested and given a 23-year sentence for murder in a Mexican court. In 2007, he was extradited back to the U.S. to face trial for Rickerson's murder, where Bates testified against him, and Matt received a 25 years to life sentence for second-degree murder with no chance of parole until 2032. David Paul Sweat was raised in the Binghamton metropolitan area by his single mother, Pamela Sweat, along with his two sisters. Sweat had a troubled childhood characterized by violent tendencies. After being sent to Florida to be raised by an uncle, he stole and wrecked his aunt's car and soon went into foster care. By the time they were in their late teens, Sweat and his cousin, Jeffrey Namajo Jr., were sporadically homeless. The two held short-lived jobs and became involved in the trade of marijuana. Sweat was known for elaborately planning burglaries he intended to commit with Jeffrey, and they were arrested several times in the late 90s and were sent to prison. In the early mornings of July 4th, 2002, Sweat, Jeffrey, and a third accomplice, Sean Duvall, burglarized a fireworks store in Great Bend, Pennsylvania to steal firearms. Upon returning to New York, they were spotted by Kevin Tarsia, a Broome County Sheriff's deputy, while transferring the stolen firearms in a parking lot from one vehicle to another. Sweat opened fire on Tarsia, hitting him multiple times before running him over with a car. As he was still alive, Navinger shot Tarsia 2 more times in the face, killing him. The 3 men were arrested a few days later. During the trial, Sweat and Jeffrey both pled guilty to first-degree murder and received life without parole to avoid capital punishment. Duvall, who cooperated with authorities, was sentenced to 5 years in prison, plus 5 years of supervised release. Unlike Matt, Sweat had no history of escaping from prison. On June 6, 2015, Matt and Sweat were found to be unaccounted for during the 5:30 a.m. morning count, having been last seen at the 10:30 p.m. count the previous night. It was reported that an external breach was found on a street approximately 500 feet outside of the prison wall. The inmates had tunneled out of the facility. Matt and Sweat had been housed in Honor Block, a privileged housing unit that allowed them access to cooking stations, televisions, wall-mounted telephones, showers, and card tables in the cell house at specified intervals during the day. According to news reports, the escapees used tools from contractors to cut their escape tunnel during the nights and return them to their toolboxes afterwards. The escape was elaborate and has been compared to the escape made in the film The Shawshank Redemption. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo took a walking tour of the facility with publicity cameras present. Authorities found that the two had planned to be picked up by prison employee Joyce Mitchell. However, according to a relative, Mitchell developed chest pains and was hospitalized. A second employee, prison guard Gene Palmer, was also charged with aiding the escape. Palmer admitted to investigators that he smuggled tools into the prison and did other favors for Richard Matt in exchange for paintings. A note was left behind on the pipe the two escapees had cut to escape, reading, "Have a nice day," with a stereotypical Asian smiley face wearing a triangular rice hat. Authorities searched the farms and fields around the town of Willsboro, New York, after receiving a tip that Matt and Sweat may have been spotted there on June 9th. Authorities spent the 9th and 10th retracing their steps near Dannemora after searching Willsboro, and also expanded the search to the border with Vermont, saying the two may have tried to flee to the state. Authorities in Canada, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and departments along the border with the U.S. and Mexico, where Matt had previously been convicted of murder, were also alerted. The FBI, Customs and Border Protection, ATF, state and local police, and the New York State Forest Rangers were all involved in the search, which was being led by the local police and U.S. Marshals Service working with prison officials. A $50,000 bounty was set for each inmate by Cuomo and was subsequently increased to $75,000 when the U.S. Marshals added $25,000 for each escapee. There were no reports of break-ins, robberies, or homicides, but there were 2 reported sightings. A stretch of nearby New York State Route 374 was closed until further notice on June 11th. School classes were canceled in Dannemora and Saranac. Later that day, the number of officers present in the area near the prison was increased to more than 500. More than the initial estimate, between 300 and 400. That afternoon and evening, after bloodhounds picked up a scent and authorities discovered a footprint in a wrapper, police began methodically searching till nightfall a wooded area near the nearby town of Caddyville, New York. Police, however, said this was not a lead that produced definite evidence that the escapees were still in the area. Areas of the more populous nearby city of Plattsburgh and parts of Lake Champlain had also been searched, and billboards asking for help were put up in New York City, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Vermont, Pennsylvania, and along the Canada-U.S. border. On June 12th, the 7th day of the search, there were still no confirmed sightings of the escapees. Later that day, prison worker Joyce Mitchell was arrested and charged with aiding the escapees. On June 13th, the search included helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, and search dogs. However, bad weather conditions, including rain, hampered search efforts. On June 20th, the search continued in Allegheny County in western New York, based on a sighting in the town of Friendship, New York. On June 22nd, the search shifted back to an area near the prison after a cabin near Owl's Head in Franklin County appeared to have been broken into. DNA from the inmates was found in the cabin, and investigators concluded that they had been there within the previous 24 hours. In the days after the escape, some prisoners reported having been beaten by guards in an attempt to obtain information so as to the whereabouts and plans of the escaped inmates. Matt was spotted in Franklin County, New York on June 26 after he shot at the driver of a passing recreational vehicle with a 20-gauge shotgun taken from a hunting camp. In the ensuing confrontation, he was shot and killed by 3 gunshot wounds to the head by U.S. Border Patrol Supervisory Agent and former Army Ranger Chris Voss in the wilderness of Owl's Head, south of Malone, New York, 50 miles west of Clinton Correctional Facility. Sweat's location was unknown at the time of Matt's death. On June 28th, New York State Trooper Sergeant J. Cook passed Sweat as he walked along the road. As Cook, circled back to question him, Sweat began running across a hayfield towards a tree line. Cook, a firearms instructor, gave chase, and when it became evident that Sweat might escape, fired 2 rounds from his .45 caliber Glock 37 pistol, hitting Sweat twice in his right shoulder and left arm at a range of 73 yards near Constable, New York, roughly 16 miles north of where Matt had been killed and just 1.5 miles from the Canadian-U.S. border. He was transported to the Alice Hyde Medical Center in Malone. It was later transferred to Albany Medical Center, where he was in critical condition. His condition was later upgraded to fair by July 1st. Sweat was moved on July 5th to a special housing unit in a maximum security 5 Points Correctional Facility in Romulus, New York. Sweat pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of first-degree escape and an additional count of promoting prison contraband. He was sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years to be served consecutively with his previous life sentence. He was further ordered to pay $79,841 in restitution. In March 2022, Sweat, known for a history of hunger strikes in prison, was authorized by a judge to be force-fed, who additionally ordered Sweat to comply with the force feeding, as well as cooperate with hydration and necessary medical treatment. The state also granted permission by the judge to use physical restraints, medications, and chemical sedation if necessary. Joyce Mitchell, defended by a Clinton County public defender, pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She was sentenced to 2 1/3 to 7 years in prison, fined $6,300, and ordered to pay $79,841 in restitution. Mitchell was granted parole and released from prison in February 2020. Gene Palmer pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband, a felony, and was sentenced to 6 months in jail and fined $5,375. He served 4 months and was released for good behavior. The Inspector General's report was released in June 2016 and found that long-standing systemic failures in management oversight by DOCCS enabled 2 convicted murderers to meticulously orchestrate their escape from a maximum security facility almost in plain sight. The report noted the failures of 20 individual correctional employees, both civilian and uniformed. Other than Palmer and Mitchell, no criminal charges were brought against any prison employee. 1 was demoted, 2 were suspended, pending arbitration, 9 returned to work after lesser penalties were applied, and the remainder retired or resigned before being punished. The report was highly critical of the lack of cooperation and misleading and lying testimony by prison employees. Let us know your thoughts on this case in the comment section below. Is there something we missed or something that we should have included in this episode? Let us know. And hey, if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And if you want to support the channel, go ahead, buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade the equipment, bring new hosts, be able to pay them, and hopefully one day take this show on the road. So as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.